idea number 3, a Green New Deal would be fatal in the fight against coronavirus. Or I can think of this as a Green New Deal would be coronavirus's best friend. So observe that whatever, the many problems we've seen in our healthcare system that are connected to coronavirus, we are bringing to bear. They're kind of two big things that we're noticing with that not we're noticing, but that one can notice. And so I'd put them in the category of we're using a lot of machines to improve our lives, and then we're using a lot of manpower, and in particular mental power in the form of the medical industry. And both of these are made possible by low-cost, reliable fossil fuel energy. So in the case of the machines, you can think about the hospital equipment, ventilators, factories that are scaling up to produce vital products, all the transportation machines that are bringing products where they're needed. All of these are being powered by low-cost, reliable energy, overwhelmingly from fossil fuels. And then another point that's a little more subtle but very important is that if you think about the manpower that's available in terms of the number of people in the medical field and then you can even put more people in the medical field if necessary. There are regulations that can get in the way of this, but you can mobilize a lot of people to help with this issue if needed. That's only possible because of low-cost fossil fuel machine power that enables us to do the very basics of our survival, like grow our food and get water and shelter and clothing. Allows us to do those with very few people, very low cost, very little human time. So we have a lot of time freed up to do other things. In societies where they lack low-cost machine power, they're spending most of their time on manual labor for the basics, and there's not only do they lack the machines, but they lack the manpower and the mental power to use those machines and to otherwise help people through the medical industry. So in both of these, I think of it really as, the fossil fuel industry, by producing by far the lowest cost energy for most people, for billions of people around the world and hundreds of millions of people in the U.S., they're really unsung heroes of this effort. And then that relates to the Green New Deal, because the Green New Deal says we should rapidly outlaw fossil fuels and nuclear, which is almost 90% of our energy, and use almost 100% solar and wind. And not to be too repetitive with what I've talked about before, but solar and wind they're unreliable energy. I don't call them renewables, I call them unreliables. So no modern country is getting even 25% of their total energy from solar and wind. And there's just an example that sticks with me, that's been sticking with me during this crisis, is like last year, Australia experienced a blackout when the solar panels stopped working, and it was a 9-hour blackout because of an unexpected cloud. And you just think if they were expecting a certain amount of sunshine, but they had this big cloud and it stopped. And I've really been thinking, do we want our ventilators in factories to stop working when there are unexpected clouds? And really, the more we try to rely on unreliables, the less margin there is for error, and you're going to have crises. You're going to have times when you need a lot of electricity and you are not getting it. And we should really think about, when these life and death issues, it is really life and death that the power be always available in the quantity that we need it. And that is not something you do with anything resembling 100% renewable. Nobody has any clue about that, but even as you try to approach that, you're getting in huge trouble. And then the other thing is that it's not only that it decreases the reliability of the power the more you try to use it, but it also dramatically increases the cost, because when you have unreliable energy, it needs 100% backup from reliable energy. So then you need unreliable infrastructure plus reliable infrastructure, which is always more expensive than just reliable infrastructure. And so that adds cost. And then that means that for all kinds of purposes, it's more expensive. And if you think hospital, something like 50% of their costs are electricity based. And so you just think about already the strain that's put on medical care, and then just think about what is it like if energy is 3-4 times more expensive, like it is in Germany, where Stefan lives. So you guys have any thoughts on this issue? What would it be like to fight coronavirus under a Green New Deal?
I mean, well, this isn't exactly to that point, but I think it's worth connecting this to the point you made earlier about healthcare, which is we have had a new deal in healthcare. If you think about the Green New Deal is essentially let's put the government in control of our energy decisions. We've put the government in control of our healthcare decisions, and it has contributed to our current problems. And I mean, you can just take something like certificate of need laws, which in order to build a hospital or have certain kinds of healthcare machines, you actually have to get approval from the government that there's a need for this. Not that you can do it profitably or that you can use it, but basically it allows your competitors to come in and say, no, we don't think that there needs to be a new hospital in our neighborhood. And I'm not necessarily saying that that particular regulation is causally important in this case, but it's that you've put the government in control of something, and therefore you've taken away our ability of free individuals to adapt to something. And but the Green New Deal, I think, is much worse, because I think, the way that government control over healthcare is exercised, I don't think is fully on a human flourishing standard. It's more on a non-standard, whereas the Green New Deal is explicitly getting rid of the most pro-human sources of energy.
Yeah,
Stefan, any comments?
yeah. I think if you want to compare that to something like the sort of lockdown right now, a lockdown has to be limited in some capacity at least. Um, so some essential workers like water supply, food supply, and so on have to go on. Otherwise, we would all die, right? So the lockdown has to be limited. It will be damaging, but it has to be limited in some form. So, but a Green New Deal threatens essentially the underlying energy supply. So in a best case scenario, it will make it much more expensive, but it will somehow technically work. Given the proposals, I don't think that's true, but it it is it is essentially unlimited and unending damage to the economy. It will go on for generations, if you keep that policy going, because you are taking away sort of the best energy source option in most applications, and forces us to replace them with something inferior. And this, makes it more expensive. What does it mean? It means we don't have many of the options that we have right now. So it will impoverish us. At least it will make us much poorer. So this will be much harder to fight anything, or to do anything. And fighting Corona will certainly be more problematic in a poor economy. And this is again an analogy to the climate policies. The question is, do you do more harm with certain policies that will make you poorer and have less access to resources and so on, compared to what you're preventing? Just from a purely utilitarian calculation.